Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zachary Myers, and on behalf of our team at Carahsoft, I would like to welcome you to our MinIO and H2O webinar, Building Your On-Prem Sovereign AI Foundation for Government Agencies. At this time, I would like to introduce our speakers for today's webinar, Cameron Cherry, President and GM at MinIO, and Jeffrey Phelan, Public Sector Chief Technologist at H2O. Cameron and Jeffrey, the floor is yours.
Zach, thank you so much for that great introduction. We truly appreciate it. And we want to thank all the participants in the webinar. We're very excited to share with you this content and this information today. It's a great pleasure to share the stage here with my very good friend, Jeffrey Phelan, and I'm very excited to do this webinar for several reasons. For those of you I know that know Jeff and I, because we've been in industry for a very long time, we're at a very interesting inflection point. If you had the great opportunity to visit both the NVIDIA GTC DC conference this week or the Google Public Sector Cloud conference this week, it's not your normal IT anymore. So, what we'd like to cover with you today is how you can revolutionize your data layer, but also really take very pragmatic, calculated steps into your AI endeavors. As we look around and we see some of the top challenges for on-prem sovereign AI, because we are beginning to see workloads shift and rebalance, and Jeffrey and I are going to share some context and some bantering around what we're seeing in the market today from our customers, but it's really going to start to walk you through where we're seeing data gravity begin to grow, but more importantly, how you can leverage it to maximize the mission benefit. So let's first frame the context of the conversation because we think that's really important when we start to walk through some of these data sets. We know that there are a lot of people that are using both public and proprietary data. This becomes really important when we talk about model training, the use of RAG strategies versus commercial LLMs, but also more importantly, the power of H2O AI combined with MinIO, where you can start to tailor your own models in private, which is extraordinarily important when we think of missions that exist in the top secret or the SCI space. But generally speaking, what we're seeing across the board is data really is the biggest challenge. We start to see skill set concerns. You'll understand, internal expertise. The wonderful thing you'll learn today between H2O and MinIO is that the software is incredibly easy to use. So to be able to ramp up on the software, that starts to allay that concern on top of all of the free and open courseware that exists in the market today that we publish to empower and enable great civil servants, servants in the DoD and the IC space to continue their AI aspirations using these tools to create a mission advantage. We see a lot of interesting concerns about using AI, and those concerns can be warranted. Most people didn't realize as we rushed into the world of ChatGPT or OpenAI, there were some things that we needed to take a look at. Things like even our prompts, our prompt engineering, the queries we're asking of data, they all fall under the NIST 800-171 guidelines for controlled but unclassified information. More importantly, when we start to think of how we put this together with RAG data, it can be quite provocative when you think of, I might be revealing sources or methods. So again, the power of H2O and MinIO together is allowing you to do this in a private, sovereign manner, on-prem, disconnected, DDoS environments, whatever your mission operating environment may be. For us, our top priorities together and independently are all about security, trust, and privacy. It's quite fascinating because, ironically, what we're seeing is a tale of two cities. We have one side where we're rapidly going into our adoption mode, or we're getting ready to start adopting AI or starting to use it. But you can see the minority of this is people are not considering it yet. The 9% that don't have plans to use that technology, they're going to fall behind in the coming years because we will see a pervasive adoption of AI. But we have to remember AI is a spectrum. There's a spectrum of lightly augmenting the human interactions and human aided. And on the far end of the spectrum, we have fully autonomous, robotic, all these other capabilities with the promise of AI. Where we live today really is on the other side of that spectrum. It's the human-aided automation, being able to help the human deal with the volume of data in this extreme bloom of data that we're seeing, and being able to allow them to execute mission in a very effective and efficient manner with these low no-code solutions, looking across your corpus of information. What is really incredible is this chart was staggering when we started to see just how that data bloom is beginning to unfold. Because as we begin to start the march out of 2025 and 2026, these numbers are becoming the reality of the world. We're starting to see more and more people really beginning to rethink their data management strategy. And it really starts with, how am I storing my data? How am I recapitalizing my data? What am I doing to purpose build this data set and information for the future? And jointly, we share a lot of these use cases that are coming in. It's not just cloud native applications, but machine learning and AI is becoming one of the top use cases, or just general application development, what we're finding in the mission space. And this is why I'm excited. I can't wait to hear Jeffrey's part of this talk, is his capabilities excite me when you think of building applications of the future, but using them on the foundation of AI, the world really gets exciting. Then when you start to think of data fusion, that a lot of the work that we do in the intelligence and national security community, being able to do that all source sensor fusion or IoT and be able to do it effectively, efficiently, and begin to produce metadata for the analysts faster, really is the key here, because we know in any mission environment, whether you're in the DoD and we talk about the OODA loop, or whether you're in the civilian environments and we talk about decision advantage, it is all about getting to those outcomes and those decisions far quicker, far faster, while we're dealing with this explosion of data and information. So really the critical role becomes infrastructure, data, and modern tools yet once again. So as we start to think about data in what's coming, we have to reimagine what our infrastructure or our enterprise infrastructure looks like. What we begin to see with traditional storage mediums or storage strategies is every time I reach my capacity, I have to add a new head node or I have to add some sort of new specialized device. And then I've got to start to solve for the other input and output challenges across the network, like network topology, network choke points, IO coming off those devices, and then how am I actually transmitting that information across the network? And we start to see right around that 20 petabyte, there all of these issues begin to get exacerbated across the current DoD and civilian networks. So what we're talking about here is a fundamental shift and why architecture matters. These vertically tightly integrated appliances, although work very well for what we used to think about the enterprise, as we start to think about what our new data requirements become when we want smarter, more intelligent data and information, we have to rethink the entire architecture of how we store data and information. And what we see emerging because of the great lessons that our partners in the cloud space have taught us, all the cloud service providers, the popular ones that you're used to working with, is I have to loosely couple my relationship between hardware and software at the data layer. And that's really the power of what you begin to unlock with these newer solutions and moving towards object native architectures. It allows you to maximize the investments you're making in hardware because you can sweat that hardware longer, yet you still receive innovation at the speed and scale of software. And you begin to remove those IO bottlenecks because we've all learned, right? AI is not new. It's been around since the 60s. What was missing from the 60s was this large amount of data set to train these large language models against, and then capabilities like what H2O brings to be able to build your models, and then these no-code applications on top of the data set. Storing the data, though, became the new challenge. How do I make my data smarter and prepare for this AI-driven world? Data architecture is also object native. There's quite a few things that you have to now consider if you're an enterprise architect, if you are a systems engineer, a solutions architect, or even a cloud architect. These are a couple of very straightforward attributes that we begin to see truly matter in this object native defined world. Strictly consistent is extraordinarily important because when we typically think of storing data, we think of storing data in the manner of a RAID through RAID 0, RAID 5, and then how we stripe that RAID across multiple devices. And then we have to deal with the complexity of global namespace and how do we accomplish that. And we know missions aren't just local. And that goes for civilian, state, local, higher education, whatever the case may be. So when we get these data blooms at the tactical edge of large volumes of data, we really have to figure out how we can expand that and make that available across the entire namespace. We're also learning that when you think of how you have to stripe your data services, inline is the fastest way to do this. As your objects are being written, you have to be able to stripe your metadata, all the other information regarding the object, encrypt, decrypt, and being able to provide that in a highly conducive manner at scale. So to give you an example, when you're encoding and decoding a trillion objects, which can exist in your fabric, you have to be able to do that in milliseconds and nanoseconds. But you also have to provide that in a mobile manner so that data can move across your enterprise more simply and use data as an asset rather than a location. So what ends up happening is we have this data foundation for the AI ready stack. And what we're beginning to see is it's not just structured, it's unstructured data as well. And these are just a few simple examples of where we're bringing data into these new data lakehouses to prepare the data layer for these great tools like H2O provides. So whether it's coming from operational applications, like your traditional ERP, CRM, finance, or HR, or whether you have sensors at the tactical edge or sensor information, you have data stored in the cloud, or if you're doing certain types of on-prem applications, we're beginning to see that all of that data needs to be available in one simple place so that you can be able to gain a completely different situational awareness about the operational environment that the mission is working in. Jeff, this is the part I've been excited to start really kicking into. So I'd like to hand it over to you at this point so that we can begin to talk about really past the data layer. How do we begin to really unlock all that value and power of the data that we've collected?
Yeah, well, thanks, Kim. I think it's important though, also, both H2O and MinIO have been working together for over a decade, right? And so part of this is understanding how organizations have traditionally used analytics in their business and what are those struggles. And as they're starting to get overwhelmed by that data, they're getting, lots of interest and lots of enthusiasm around generative and agentic platforms. And historically, and I loved that slide you had earlier that had the chart around all the data types with the object cloud native, right? Because historically, organizations have had use cases, they have data associated with that, and they build a technology stack to execute. And then when a new use case comes up, typically there's different data associated with it. And so they go through that engineering effort. And sort of what we've done here is now that you've got all of this different data and all these different formats, you have to be agnostic to the tool set in some cases, meaning we want you to be able to pull the data in and present you with the tooling necessary to execute on that data. So if you've got audio, video, images, 3D data, structured data, CSV files, you have NetFlow, right? You've got databases, tabular data, streaming data. And so having that flexibility and all that living in object makes it immediately available to the end user. So now we can allow them, and this is kind of how we license the platform. We show this, right? So if you've got generative capabilities that you need or predictive, and we're known in the regulated space, we're the bread and butter for fraud detection across all of banking and insurance and so forth. And how do we bring those best practices in And I think what's important for this audience is now being able to look at your traditional operational mission-based data, right? Coming off of sensors and maybe lots of financial data or other things. And how do we allow you to apply the latest generative and agentic capabilities, but run it fully air gapped on-prem so that the security teams can look at this and sign off on it, all the compliance and governance pieces. And, you and I deal with a lot of the IC and the DoD, and none of that data is ever going to leave the perimeter, right?
Right.
It's staying inside the wire. And so we've seen lots of instances where, they build Nipper GPT and put Chinese models on there and somebody gets in trouble. And so how do we allow the organization to run through all of those capabilities? And, one of the integrations with MinIO is now having that fully secure, air gapped um, model repository and serving capability, right? That typically is living on someplace like Hugging Face, right? So you're creating an opening into the system. Now we lock that down. So we're running at these very high, IL5, IL6 and above networks where they need to be able to bring in a variety of tools. And so this is just kind of an overview of the flexibility. We've got document processing capabilities that work in 50 languages out of the box, handwriting, upside down, sideways, so you don't need to pre-train. So the platforms are becoming much, much more flexible. So we can go to the next slide. So one of the things I want to talk about are use cases because we see a lot of vendors talking about RAG techniques. People are putting documents in, they're using it for policy reviews and trying to understand that for content analysis and so forth. They're doing it on the procurement side with their acquisition people and so forth. But this is an interesting use case. This is with a law enforcement organization that's lawfully intercepting phone calls, right? They're coming in Spanish, and this is running on a fully air gapped flyaway kit, right? So we're processing 6,000 phone calls a day coming in Spanish. We're transcribing in Spanish, summarizing it, and then translating it to English and summarizing it in English. We're doing analytics on top of that. And the important piece here is this particular agency could only listen to 15% of their calls. Now they can listen to 100%. They've got artifacts on that, and this is really moving the mission forward. And so you can imagine in lots of different security applications, how do we take, agentic and generative capabilities, apply it to the data set coming in and help automate some of these areas. This particular group uses human analysts. The problem is 50% of their analysts fail their polygraph test monthly, Cam, and they've got a huge turnover and it ends up becoming a huge problem for them, right? So now we can help scale that out for them. And with the flexibility of these platforms, you can start to think about large language models more like the tires on the car as opposed to the engine, right? Most agencies are still trying to bake off LLMs. And the reality is that the best large language model for your use case that you find today will literally not be the best one tomorrow, right? And so what I love about the flexibility of the platform and this partnership is we want to give you the ability to swap those large language models in and out virtually in real time based on the use case, the cost, the deployment, the domain specificity, any of the areas that you have. And the state of the art is such where when your data comes in, we can actually look at that data and auto select the optimal large language model for you and the agentic approach, multimodal aspects. So this gives the government and our customers the ability to now advance the mission, stay within the policy, all the security guidelines they have, and do that securely.
Jeff, what I like about this example, and it's just sheerly brilliant for a couple of reasons, and you mentioned it earlier, but I think it's worth emphasizing a bit with the audience. It was on a flyway kit, right? So when we hear a lot of conversations today talk about AI, I would think arguably what shows up in most people's minds is a data center full of GPUs. Now, look, we love NVIDIA. NVIDIA is a brilliant partner, and they have helped advance AI as a technological revolution in an extraordinary manner. But I think what you and I are really talking about here is moving beyond the model training and getting to inference at the edge. So now what we're talking about is something that is compute agnostic, but
Mhm.
more importantly, it's portable and it's tactical, and it allows us to operate AI in a mission-centric manner versus an enterprise IT manner. And I think that's what's so cool and powerful about the use case you brought forward is the mission was able to take it forward without compromising how the ConOp of the mission worked. We
Yeah.
were able to very seamlessly integrate with that ConOp, and it's a very, very cool use case, but I don't think can be understated or overstated enough the transportability of
Yeah, and along with that, you get into cyber use cases, Cameron, which is a big demand area we see. And so the Air Force is innovating. So NVIDIA's just come out with their new Spark, right? Well, guess
yeah.
what? I can host the large language model on that tiny little Spark box. I can connect it to my flyaway kit, and I can run this super lightweight at the edge with all of my agents running locally, and you get all the benefits. So the advances keep coming, and we're getting closer and closer to the edge with more and more sophisticated capabilities. And we'll talk about that in a couple of these other use cases. But, you know, the idea that you've got to be able to take a risk and integrate, with the cloud and worry about a lot of the cost issues and data and other things, we can eliminate a lot of that.
And if I'm not mistaken, the innovation, the device you described, can do almost a trillion parameter model locally on that little powerful box.
It's
It's
only getting
extraordinary.
well, the way to think about it is as bad today as it's ever going to be. It's only going to get better, so it just keeps going. Let's jump over to a couple more. So this is a really interesting one, guys. So this is an intel agency, and we'll just leave it at that. But they have a challenge right now because they have lots of mission partners that are supplying them with data on a 24 by 7 basis. They drop it into S3 buckets, but the structure of that data is never defined. It could literally be pocket trash, pictures, documents, websites, URLs, PDFs, Word documents. It could be a database. It could be anything. And the current state of the art within these agencies, unfortunately, is a human operator goes into that S3 bucket, Cam, as you know, and they manually review that data. They hand build the ETL and the data pipelines custom for that single bucket for that particular data set. And it takes them days and weeks to do that. And this is a mission critical area. And what we've done is we've deployed um, large language models that are going in, and when data hits those buckets, we automatically go in and we use the models to do all of the entity resolution and analysis of that data, automatically create an extract in a JSON format that allows them to see the relationships here. And you can see that forms an XGraph file that gets pumped high side into their system of record, which is Neo4j. This is now done literally in real time for them. And the first time we showed it to them, they were like, this is magic. How is this working? Now we have this is a little app we built on the front end. We've got a human in the loop. They can validate everything. And I think one of the things Cam talked about earlier is this is an entire no code, low code approach. So anyone can use this, but the back end is completely transparent. So if you love Python code and shell script and working at the command line, you can see literally every single thing that's going on. So we provide validation steps in this, but this has revolutionized how this particular customer is working. We've had our second expansion there, and they continue to bring on more and more customers. So this sort of auto ETL is widespread across government, and we're excited about where this is going.
So Jeff, it's great because the first use case you talked about, I think demonstrated breaking the myth that you can make this portable. That was awesome about that use case. What's really interesting about this use case is it begins to illuminate the power of what we're talking about better together between MinIO and H2O as we begin the first layer of data triage as objects are written into their buckets, exposing that metadata and writing the metadata at the time the object is being written. You could do that immutably, so we can make sure we're carefully securing that data, but then exposing that metadata, pre-staging with the iceberg tables that we've now embedded within our software, that symbiotic relationship to expose all of that to H2O. And then, as you mentioned, in the CI/CD pipeline or data pipeline, we're getting as close to near real time as we can get for the analyst. And
Yeah.
again, you've always picked such eloquent use cases because this one now is truly about how do we positively affect that end user at the time of mission need, which we see that mission need is the new SLA. And it's really extraordinary about the power of how you unlock this data. We've just basically taken a whole corpus of information with no relevance and made it relevant. So just such another great, powerful use case.
Well, and I think what's important here is this is running in a hyperscaler region that's fully air gapped. And one of the challenges is that a lot of the native services are not accredited at the level required for this mission area. So we've been able to bring in very, very advanced capabilities across the board using predictive, generative, and agentic capabilities that run really at the highest level of security in our government environments. So now we're meeting the mission where it needs to be. And we have, I think, if we jump over to this next use case, where this becomes really compelling here is this particular agency had an 18-month engineering exercise of basically building, their Python scripts and putting this whole platform together. And the reason we were selected here, and this is a very large RDT&E environment with 256 H100s. There's a lot of horsepower and a lot of data running through here. And we got this customer to IOC, initial operating capability, on day one, right?
Wow.
So they literally were able to build models the first day they turned the software on, right? And so, again, how do you operate at these very high security levels and build them a flexible platform? And what's interesting about this particular customer is we really started out trying to help them with object detection and data labeling, which is a huge problem, deep learning problems, transformer based, but they are also applying predictive analytics into this environment. And they, like everybody else, they want to talk to the data using generative aspects, right? So here's an environment where now they're focused on the mission space. They don't have to custom build tools. And like many of the other agencies we have, they have maybe, let's say, limited access or limited ability in terms of which models they're actually able to utilize. And so we do a lot of work with them on making sure that they're available to them. And typically what we see, Cam, is the agencies will go to one of the, sort of the public models, the really big ones, to validate the use case, right? But then once you want to put that into production, it's not affordable, right?
Right.
You can't afford the token fees. It just becomes too onerous. And I think, and we didn't talk about a lot here, but I think what's really great about our solution, our combined solution, is it's an annual subscription rate, right? It's based on consumption, but it's not around tokens and users and queries. We're not trying to nickel and dime people. We want to size you for your mission and give you some cost certainty, which is really important. And so all of these areas where we can help you fine tune, use smaller language models, get domain specific ones in there and do that without having to go through all of the re-engineering, and you're not having to say, oh, I need to buy another module. It's in there.
Right.
And historically, it'll just work for you, which is really good, right? The key thing here, real quick, we labeled 600 images in less than 20 minutes with 100% accuracy on the images, right? And this blew them away.
Extraordinary.
They said normally that takes them several days to do. Um, the other thing is the system's really interesting because it will show you where the computer vision, where it's actually looking, where it's struggling, having problems. You can push that to the field. So in a lot of our military applications, they love understanding, oh, hey, we're getting a lot of images in from people in the field, and ones that are, let's say, too high or low or too close or far away. You can see where the models are not doing a good job, and then you can let them know, hey guys, you know, sh- take this picture from the left side, not from the back, whatever, and it's going to improve that. So it gives you, sort of easy to use feedback loop for the analysts. And because it's no code, and I'm not a data scientist, I can run this entire platform, Cam, right? So we have done some really funny work where my engineers, I'm literally sitting next to a PhD, and that's where all the brain power is. And I'm actually running the system, and I'm sort of the monkey in the middle of all this, but we're doing things in near real time, solving some hard problems. So it's really great where you can help advance the maturity of the group. But uh, for example, in a lot of these military missions, Cam, you got young men and women that are 19, 20 years old. They don't have data science degrees, but they need to be able to use these tools. And that's the elegance I think that we can present.
You're foreshadowing one of our topics later in the discussion, so I'm excited. It's a great setup.
Yes, why don't we jump to so the last one here, I just want to, and I'm not going to dig too much into this, but one of the things that we're able to bring in from an H2O perspective is really the gold standard when it comes to fraud detection. Every bank in the world uses us. Every time you swipe a credit card, there's an H2O risk model for MasterCard that runs on every point of sale in the world. And so we can run on something as small as a watch. So again, a lot of these predispositions are like, oh, I've got to go to the cloud, I've got to be connected to use these tools. That's just not the case. And these are best practices that are being used by regulated industry. And so we can allow organizations to do very, very sophisticated analysis. We're, talking to agencies that are worried about fraud detection for disbursements after a disaster, where they have huge fraud levels. It's almost amazing how much fraud, unfortunately, is going on there. And how can we help save that money and put it back into back to work a little bit better? So all of these agentic frameworks are being used um, aggressively across industry. We are enterprise wide across AT&T. We do all their fraud detection for them. We monitor their global networks. We're helping them with their they have 15,000 trucks they roll out after a disaster, right? So all the maintenance records there. We looked at 30 years of weather data to help them with their 5G tower location. We want the government to take advantage of what's already been very successful in these regulated spaces, Cam, right? We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're not trying to do maybe something really sexy no one's ever done before. We want to do the basic blocking and tackling that helps us execute the mission, provide those citizen services very, very effectively with the same efficacy, security, and auditability that you get in these industries. So this is all here ready to go. And I think that we've got this sovereign capability. A funny story, I worked at Northrop Grumman for 6 years, and I went into a room one day and I was like, who are you? And he was a lawyer, and he says, I'm the no in Northrop,
Ah,
right? And so that no person exists everywhere in government. And so we have to understand where those objections live. And to your earlier slide, it's around security, it's around compliance, it's around governance and trust. And I think we've got a way to address those. So now we can get them past those objections. Let's get started on validating the use case. Let's get it out and then let them expand their utilization.
all right, Jeff, that's awesome. And you made that great dovetail into this because we hear a lot of discussion around the industry today about data scientists with regards to AI and about how do we help the existing workforce skill itself or retrain itself. What I love about both of our companies is one of the first principles thinking in designing the software was ease of use. How will my users look at this software and how can I make their lives as easy as we could possibly make them? Whether you're in the builder community, in the DevSecOps community, you're an end user operator, you're part of the infrastructure and enterprise IT team. The goal is the same. How do we make it easy for you to install, use, operate, and maintain? So what we find is what's old is new again when we talk about the talent and strategy necessary for this. And Jeff, you talked about it, the great power that you unlock in your tool isn't a data scientist, it's the mission user. It's that person that really understands the mission environment, the outcomes they're trying to affect, the things they're trying to do in support of their role within government. And being able to do that without the data scientist, I think, is probably one of the most powerful gifts you can offer an end user, right? This is that type of talent and success. So what we're finding is, although you may need to have a little bit of technological savvy to understand these conversations, which we know most government people in the mission have, you can't do the mission job without the other skill set. So that skill becomes as equally as important as it is today. Second was you mentioned, which I really like, is we're building on industry leading building blocks. We're not trying to do something that is, say, putting the man on the moon again or these types of things. We're really talking about taking these fundamental building blocks that we've learned over the last 20 years of building technological infrastructure to serve a mission outcome. But what we're doing is we're changing that first principles thinking again. So we know open core, open source, but secure with trust built in, validation of data. But being able to take that data mobility becomes vitally important in today's world because we know everyone's mobile. When we think of how many devices are out there in the world, so these industry-leading building blocks allow us to create interoperability, reduce vendor lock-in, and be able to make sure we can unlock the real power of the person. So when we talk about shifting data from just simply being a dead asset as it is today to strategic data, and you think of infrastructure planning, companies like ourselves are actually making that role easier. You know, Jeff, like you, I came from the systems integrator space, and I remember the arduous task of learning ITIL v3 to do IT service management, and I had to do capacity planning and all this infrastructure planning. We had to do it because the software wasn't easy to use and there wasn't enough information about how the software operated to do this. So really being able to do the same fundamental things we do today for planning and complement that, again, these skills exist and are pervasive all over the government workforce. So we're really humbled and proud to be able to say, look, you are not only relevant in the world of AI, but you have a very powerful skill set and point of view because you've been supporting a mission for 5, 10, 15, or 20 years. That is the objective. That's the strategy that really unlocks and harnesses your power. And
Yeah,
the last thing is true collaboration, right? It's all about collaboration, not only amongst industry, as we've seen here between you and I, Jeff, but industry and government to really make sure that we can unlock a lot of the capability that the software exists. I know you probably have a few data points you wanted to add here, so I was going to pause here, Jeff, and let you.
well, yeah, I just wanted to double tap on the collaboration and kind of the open source thing. So, a lot of people may not realize that, both of our companies have a deep history in the open source space, right?
Right,
And so, one of the things that what I really like about our platform, so, before we sort of got into the enterprise tooling business, we've been around since 2012. We were the one of the largest providers, and well, we still are one of the largest providers of open source software in the world for AI and ML capabilities. So any data scientists that are using effectively structured and unstructured libraries, they're using H2O3, libraries under the hood. We push code
right,
every day, and the major players, Databricks, Data Robot, Data IQ, Palantir, C3 AI, they all use H2O3 under the hood, right? So we're sort of part of that fabric already, and so now by leveraging that, and I think what's important for both of us is the transparency of the platform, that what it
right,
allows you to do, it's not black boxed. When we get someone buys this race car, we don't want them to drive it around in the parking lot, right? And we're also not trying to drive it around for you. We want to show you how to get it out on the highway, put it in fifth gear, put the top down, and really take advantage of these capabilities and do that in a secure way. So I think it's a really good way. And part of our story is just helping people understand that you can do this in the mission space, highly secure, and leverage a lot of the techniques and capabilities that you're used to already, but do it in a much more efficient manner.
that's right. Jeff, it's extraordinary to think that two companies are over a decade, decade and a half old doing this in the open source This is almost our coming out party and saying, look, it's great that we've been OEM'd and everybody else,
Yeah.
but it's time now to teach the rest of the world in the mission environment because of the inflection point we're at, right? We're at a financial tipping point as a country. We have to think of how to do things more efficiently and effectively, and we have to figure out how to do it using automation and tools. So it's a very powerful message you described here.
Well, every one of the systems integrators we're talking to and the agencies, the days of rolling your own stuff, maintaining that infrastructure, and going with lots and lots of got software is coming to an end, right? And I think the elegance of what we've got here is we can provide end users with a very robust, well supported, highly scalable COTS platform that they can build all their domain specific applications on top of, and they still get all of that enterprise zero trust scalability, all the flexibility that they need to do the mission. And it's we're seeing some are going there uh, in a really excited way, some are going kicking and screaming, right? But I think it's an important part of it. And you know, for us, the no code aspect drives a huge amount of adoption and a lot of usage. But the fact that the entire platform can run programmatically via the APIs, and you have people that have built a lot of their own stuff, it's super flexible. You can use all of that. You're not getting locked out. And then that's really kind of the mindset we want to help people. They don't have to spend all their time maintaining the system and doing a lot of that pick and shovel work. We want to allow them to actually perform the mission, get access to the data, better understand it, and not spend all their time sort of quote, getting it in shape, for lack of a better term, right?
Yep, you mentioned through your conversation, cloud versus on-prem and the choices that are available to us. What we're finding the core of sovereign AI, and I think you would agree, Jeff, is it is going to start this journey back to an on-prem or hybrid type of thinking. Now, when we say on-prem, let's be super clear about what we're talking about. We know the governments are facing kind of this almost hypocritical dilemma. We see the FISMA scorecards. We have to shut down data centers. We know there's policy out there to do that. But I'm a very, very strong, passionate advocate of what Miss Suzette Kent did when she was the United States CIO, the shift from cloud cloud first to cloud smart. I think we're living in an era where the cloud smart really has to take hold. When we say on-prem, it may not be a true data center in a government installation. It could be a managed data center with the great ecosystem of hosting providers that are authorized on behalf of the government to host these government workloads all the way up to a TSSCI level. And there's a whole host of them out there. I think the real punchline here, Jeff, that you and I are saying is whether you're on-prem, cloud, or hybrid, our platform and our tools are exactly the same. What we're
Yeah,
talking about here is data sovereignty, the ability for the government to control the security boundary the way they see fit. It is about empowering them and not by locking them into our business model. Right now, we love our CSPs. Our CSPs have done great work for the government for the last 15 to 20 years, but there is inherently some limitations in the deployment model. We know this. You have to come to them. As you and I described and have discussed this entire webinar, this is about us bringing the technology into the mission environment the way the mission needs to take it
that's
into
right.
its environment.
Yeah,
So the great news about these is we get to unlock. It's not an either or, it's an and. It's put the workload, the data, and the capability where you most need it. But when you want to create sovereign AI, you need the tools that allow you to create it on your terms. And I think our tools combined are exactly answering that call. And we allow you the choice of where you're putting it. And that is what the modern enterprise is about. The value proposition of cloud many years ago was the proverbial your mess for less. If I could still use that term as an old IT guy, and what we found it was our mess for a whole lot more. especially when it came with our data. Because as you know, just like with open source, we've learned free puppies are great, but then you got to feed them.
Yeah.
So there is a cost. So we're trying to lower those cost barriers, lower the deployment barriers, and really truly create the ability for the sovereignty of these workloads to reside anywhere the mission needs it. All right, as we move into it, I like these. Jeff, why don't you talk about for the people on the phone that do want to get more advanced skill sets available to them? I love what you all have done here with the university.
Yeah, so we've got H2O AI University. It's something you could literally just go to our website, which is h2o.ai. By the way, we were the first AI domain in the world, and the company is called H2O because our founder wants AI to be as prevalent as water. It's that simple. But we are really focused on training and enablement. And so we have free, self-paced training and certifications for both our predictive and our generative platform, as well as our agentic capabilities. We have them on Udemy and Coursera, and like MinIO, we have a giant YouTube library of videos as well. And if you go to our GitHub, we've got all kinds of open source tools there. And for those of you that really love lots of documentation, you literally go to docs.h2o.ai, and you can go berserk on as much, user manual integration, use cases, architecture that you want. But the key there is, again, to the point earlier, is we want to be able to enable, the mission. We don't want them to have to giant rip and replace or some huge, engineering effort to get rolling on this stuff. We want to help them get integrated, get started. We're highly confident that, they're going to be successful. And then how do you plan going forward? But this is a great resource that we provide to our partners and to our customers and the public. So I'd encourage you to take advantage of it.
Jeff, thank you for that. And as far as MinIO, we do just like you, right? So we have some great documents available on minio.io. We do a huge YouTube library as well. So, we're about empowering the workforce, empowering the people, right? Empowering everybody to be able to reskill and retool themselves in a very simple manner, do it at your own leisure. I find myself now, Jeff, of course, I am a reformed technologist, but on the weekends over coffee, looking at an awful lot of AI-based YouTube videos, and it's enjoyable. It's great to be able to understand where the world's headed. So appreciate the information there. Zach, with that, we'll go ahead and hand over to you for Q&A.
Thank you, sir. If anybody has any questions, feel free to utilize the chat or the Q&A pod at the bottom of your screen on your toolbar. You can ask it to everyone, or you can remain anonymous. I can't ever say that word. But any way you would like to ask, I'll give you guys a moment, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Zach. I appreciate it. Also, I want to encourage you guys, if you want to play around with any of our agentic stuff, we actually have sort of a freemium version so you can see the latest and greatest. Cameron, one of the things we're excited about is a lot of the agentic workflow. We're ranking very, very high on the global sort of the Gaia framework or the benchmarking. So you see all the major players out there trying to build the most accurate AI agent platforms. And so you can kind of have an idea of what really state of the art looks like, right? And now you've got workflows where you've got agents that'll go and build MCP servers and do all the tooling for you. They're data center agents, coding agents, deep research. I'm always amazed at sort of the sophistication of the problem sets that the agents are able to execute on, right? And take a look at that. So, and what's really interesting is to see how they behave, right? Like if you give it a data set and it can't execute, it'll actually try other techniques. It'll go out on the web, it'll look for it, right? It'll generate synthetic data. The systems are really sophisticated. And so we've got folks in the Navy, for example, that are examining lidar point clouds and trying to figure out how do I use this technology to help me with preventative maintenance and generating CAD drawings and things like that. So it looks like we got a question in there. AI handle need to know security. Yeah, so on that one, there's a couple of ways that we can deal with that. We typically create something called a collection, which is where the data is going to come into, and you can put very, very fine controls on the collection. But we also give you the ability to enforce a variety of roles at the vector database level as well. So you can decide to ingest or not ingest. You can decide to index and chunk, but not respond. You can respond with redaction. So we use key cloak under the hood to integrate with a lot of the role-based access controls, Active Directory, and security controls. We've got really extensive guardrails, PII controls, and other safety mechanisms that you can put in. So we handle a lot of that. We're happy to do a follow-up and dig into the weeds on how that's executed, but we do support those types of security controls. And as I
And
said,
Jeff, to complement your
yeah,
point, we do similar with MinIO. So being able to set up a multi-tenant environment, but also get down to fine-grained access to data, data elements, data tags, for things like redaction and other means. We have a very similar one that we meet all of the EO for 14028, which is all about zero trust, privacy, all those types of things. So great question.
yeah.
Awesome. Looks like I got another one for you guys. What do you suggest to justify the spend on AI solutions like MinIO and H2O when we already have some solutions in place?
I'll be happy to open that one up, Zach. I'll tell you, Jeff and I think might have a similar answer. Look, we've ingratiated the world in the open source community for over a decade, so a lot of those solutions were, obviously no cost. What we find in a lot of mission environments is those are good, but what you typically lack is support in the mission user space. So you've got to contend with that. The world's also changed quite dramatically over the last several years. So when you look at the requirements now from, as I mentioned, the EO for that was put out regarding cybersecurity, the requirements for SBOM, right, for software bill of materials, and all of the other security requirements required, things like we have built-in key management solutions, software-defined firewalls, the encryption you need for data in motion and at rest. What we're finding is customers are building those capabilities around the open source solution, which end up costing them 2 to 3x more than just paying for the commercial solution with those additional capabilities built in and getting the security built in rather than bolted on. So security is a big deal, support is a big deal, and then when you look at the supplemental features just beyond what the core products do, as Jeff mentioned before, and we complement this prompt object. So the second you write information into the object store, you can now speak with your data to effectively understand what's getting written in there in near real time right after objects are getting committed. So a lot of these things that are in place today are great. And I think the government should be applauded for the innovation for using them. But as we mature in this space, you will need more commercial support and capability to operate at the mission speed that's being required of us today.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. We responded to an RFP where the government was utilizing some open source and they wanted to go, for example, a tokens model. They insisted on it. And, we were trying to help them understand that uh, there are more cost effective ways and more secure ways to do this, right? And just to give you an example, to your point earlier, the 2-3x, um, the sovereign approach was about $5 million a year. The open source plus the token was $54 million, right? So you're talking 10, 11x. So I think you may be, being generous and only saying it's 2 to 3, right? And the reality is we're not going to get more people to do this work, guys. We have to give them reliable, supported, scalable tools that will operate and so they can focus on the mission and not just the care and feeding of all the custom free stuff that they've been using over the years. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, we've got some metrics which we'll be happy to Zach to release to the audience. Things like as the code matures, right? You have your open source to help people understand in the DevSecOps community how to use the software. But on the commercial side, things like the commercial binary, because of this supplemental care we take in the DevSecOps for vulnerability assessment and all the other things that have to happen, it's 2 to 3x more performant than the open source. But the open source is great to run your non-production environments, build capability, and determine if it's right for you. And then when you start to look at normal maintenance charges that the government looks at, how many cycles does an admin take to maintain? How many cycles does it take to patch or do these types of things? Those are intangible costs that the developer or the builder community may not see, but the CIOs, the CTOs, the CFOs around the government, these are metrics that they care about and collect when they're thinking of total ownership cost.
That's a good way to put a punctuation mark on this. I think we're at time.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Cam and Jeff, thanks so much for the presentation. A lot of great information. We have a few other questions here, but I'll have us generate a little recap and include all the
Brilliant.
links and everything on the follow-up email along with the recording that you can share with a colleague or review it again. I know, do we have any more slides on your
That's
side?
it.
All right.
Otherwise, big thank you to the entire audience. We really appreciate the time, especially during these extraordinary times.
Well said. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you all for joining and hope you have a great rest of your day.